Back in December of 2022, I took a look at the first Knights of Honor released back in 2004. Overall, it was a pretty solid title that was fun to play, but suffered from a poor late game and some elements that unfortunately haven't aged well. Ironically enough, the sequel was released around the same time that review came out. I wanted to definitely take a look at that at some point, but first wanted to see if the game would receive any post-launch patches. To my expectation, there have been several updates addressing bugs as well as many quality of life features. With that said, is this sequel the superior title, or does it fail to take any steps forward? When you start a new game, you can select your nation and are given quite a bit of options to adjust. You can even set a minor victory path if you want to have a shorter game. This is honestly great if you don't feel like dealing with the late game and want to set a goal for yourself. For our playthrough, we will start with the earliest time we can at 1100 AD. We will also go for the standard victory of becoming the Emperor of Europe. Since I played as Normandy for my review of the first game, I figured we should do the same for this one. Let's hope I actually complete the campaign this time around. Right off the bat, the UI is very familiar to what was present in the original. Thankfully, this isn't a direct one-to-one conversion, or it would have had some issues. It is far easier now to figure out what each button represents and the game's features, various tips, as you gather your bearings. You can always disable it, which I eventually did later on. Still, it's great to see games explain the mechanics without a long, boring tutorial. Alright, so for this review, I won't reiterate too much of the base game since a majority of the experience is carried over. It is still a medieval real-time grand strategy game that mainly takes place on the overworld, with battles taking place when armies collide. One big difference is with province management. Before, you can basically build to your heart's content. Now, each province comes with a limited amount of building slots. Each province starts out with 4 but can be extended to 8 with the use of that cash money, boy. Each province also has its own speciality, which determines what special buildings and units that can be created. Since I want to recruit a bunch of Vikings again, we will need to build some barracks. I also want to prevent rebellions as much as possible, so I will be increasing each province's happiness with markets. Each building now has upgrades that can be applied. These upgrades will provide passive bonuses, create certain goods, or will unlock certain units to recruit. One nice benefit to applying these upgrades is how it also affects other provinces that contain those same buildings. It's a nice touch that can create a nice chain reaction of bonuses if done correctly. You also need to have governors in your provinces in order to gain the full amount of resources. Any towns that do not have a governor are capped at only 10% of their potential output. And just to fast forward a bit, I am very happy to report that rebellions will only occur if a province has low stability. Rebellions were a huge issue in the previous game that seemed to happen all the time, even with high public order. In my playthrough, I've only encountered 2 of them and got a huge bonus from defeating them. Basically, a pretty big increase in stability and a few hundred gold pieces. Stability can be gained from a few different ways, but the best way you can do this is through increasing your crown authority. This can be increased in various ways, but the easiest and most direct route is to pay for an increase. This requires gold as expected, as well as a fairly high amount of piety points. Since this would take forever with my base income, I built a church in a province that had a ton of religious towns. This increased the piety income by a decent amount and eventually further assisted in happiness with the various upgrades. Not too long in my campaign and I ended up in a really bad situation against Sweden. They declared war on me while I only had 1 army to muster. Since each unit now has food upkeep, I'm not able to just spam Vikings like I did in the first game. This is probably for the better, but is an issue for smaller kingdoms who don't have enough food production. As expected, this led to battle. For 2004, the battles of the original game were serviceable but nothing too impressive. They mostly stood out for their charm and their graphics. For this game, it's basically the same with being able to see more on the field and the ability to capture control points. Defeating the enemy leader will cause the whole army to rout, as well as if your leader is killed. Your soldiers are a lot more chattier this time around, as well as informing you of flanks or when an enemy breaks. Despite its simplicity, it's still quite fun, although I do wish that you could group different units together similar to Total War. Siege battles are also included in the game as well, although they are a bit different this time around. In the original, you were able to carry out an assault basically instantaneously. Now you will have to wait until the hull of the castle or the resolve of the enemy troops fall below 50%. Most of the time, the enemy will launch a desperate retaliation, hoping to inflict as much damage as possible. Because of this, I almost never had to actually assault the town, and even when I did, the enemy would still meet me far away from their tower support. This seems to be happening due to the AI's over-prioritization of taking your command points. For a future update, I wouldn't mind if the command points can be toggled on or off. King Arthur, the role-playing war game, had a similar issue back in 2009, and it is still present in a game released in 2022. While I was able to secure a victory, it was for naught as I saw multiple Swedish armies approaching. I did the only sensible thing to save my kingdom and offered my full surrender. This made me a vassal of the Swedish kingdom, which was honestly not a bad decision at all. I now had a powerful overlord protecting me as I continue to focus on my internal development and building up my military might. Since I now had an overlord in Sweden to trade with, I sent my merchant over there to do just that. Similar to the first game, your court will contain marshals, spies, clerics, diplomats, and merchants. Each has their own role and basically fulfills what was done prior. Instead of gaining experience to level up like before, each character will gain skills using books. The skills available to the knight are randomly chosen. While the system is fine within itself, I preferred the first game of having your characters level up traditionally and being able to craft your character with the skills you wanted. Now, there's just an element of RNG which I'm not too much of a fan of. To follow up on trade, the Kingdom Advantages return with a ton more goods this time around. One really welcome addition is how each good provides its own advantage without needing to complete one of the Kingdom Advantages. Completing all the Kingdom Advantages also grants a total victory, which opens up a huge opportunity to become a commercial power. I mainly did this by focusing on what special good each province was able to make and maximizing its potential. It's a fun system that continued to bring in that cash money, boy. Once I became powerful enough for any potential war and saw that the forces of Sweden were occupied elsewhere, I decided to break free and declare independence. To my honest surprise, Sweden didn't even declare war on me. Matter of fact, Sweden and I never came to fight again and became a trusted ally. Denmark also followed suit with many non-aggression pacts and trade agreements, creating a pseudo-Scandinavian alliance. For diplomacy, it's basically the same with a few new changes under the hood. The AI is now much more aware of the ages of the kings, as well as other factors to sign certain agreements or not. For example, a venerable king will not agree to a royal wedding as they do not want their kingdom to be fractured upon succession. In a reverse situation, a king would not want to sign a non-aggression pact with you if you are about to die. The AI doesn't see a point in signing an agreement that will be broken up with the succession of the next ruler. It's small changes like this that make the player rethink how to approach certain situations. While these changes are appreciated, it is still limiting in offering and asking things and hoping the AI either agrees or counters it with what they need to make the deal possible. And since I just mentioned the ages, we should talk about the royal family. Similar to before, you will need a prince to continue your dynasty and have as smooth as a succession as possible. As your son grows, you can educate them in what profession they will be when they grow up and what innate skills they will have equipped. Traditions have also been added, allowing you to learn skills that provide benefits to both the kingdom and the king. Traditions are a nice addition, and I really like how diverse each one is. You can take your kingdom to a variety of different directions, making it more militaristic, more diplomatic, more religious, and even making it more about that cash money, boy. Alright, I think this is the last time I say it. As I am now independent and want some more territory to be recognized as a great power, I began my territorial gains of mainland Europe. I captured a few territories, but they were not usable at all until I settled everyone down. This can be done in a brute force manner with an army leader, but will cause repercussions with nearby kingdoms. Instead, it is recommended for a cleric to adopt the population to create a peaceful occupation. For both options, there is a % chance of succeeding, so it may take a few tries before the province is fully stabilized. Eventually, I obtained over 5,000 fame, which made me eligible to claim the title of Emperor of Europe. Similar to the original game, the other 9 nations will vote, but you can now finally see who will vote for you and the reasons behind it. Germany was the last one I needed to convince, which took a bit of giving up lands to increase my relations with them. Thankfully, this was enough and I'm finally the Emperor of Europe. Honestly, I was quite shocked to get to this point, let alone how fast I was able to achieve it. I conquered far less than in the first game, but due to my commercial power and relationships with others, I was able to achieve this high honor. Before we wrap this up, we should talk about the presentation a bit. When it comes to the music, it is actually really good, but still out of reach of the magnificence of the original game's soundtrack. Robin Briner and Yannick Soup did a great job here, but I wouldn't say it's at the level of Borislav Slavov's performance in the first game. I was honestly hoping that he would reprise his role as the composer here, but what is on offer is still more than satisfactory. The sound effects are also solid, although the voices are more of a mixed bag this time around. The original voice actors were perfect and felt more authentic, for a lack of a better term. The new main voice this time around is still great, but many of the voices for the knights could have been better. Overall, I can say with confidence that this game is a superior title compared to the original. The Province rework is very good, the game is far more polished, and I've had no crashes at all. The only real downside I can say is how the game feels more like a modern remaster than a true sequel. Still, it's not always a bad thing. Too many times sequels get created years down the line and have nothing to do with the original title. I'm glad they kept the original gameplay intact, although I do wish there was a bit more innovation. If you liked the first, you would definitely like the second, although I'm not 100% sold on the $45 price point. I bought the game at half price and am definitely more than satisfied with my purchase. Also plan to play as a pagan nation for my next playthrough, so I'm very curious how that will turn out. Thank you guys for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.